guys, welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to put together an awesome $1,200 gaming PC for 2022. With an all AMD theme, we've picked up their 6600 XT, a great card for 1080 and 1440p gaming, alongside a Ryzen 5 5600X. Against the backdrop of Intel 12th Gen, is this still worth it? Well, I guess we're going to find out in today's video, where I'll be walking you through all the component choices, showing you how to assemble the system, and then testing it out later in around 15 of the latest and most popular AAA titles. Let's do this. Let's kick things off by taking a look at the core components first off, comprised of the motherboard, any of your SSD storage, your RAM or your memory, and of course the processor or CPU. For this build, I've gone for an AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. With 6 cores, 12 threads, and some solid base and boost clock speeds, it delivers really great all-around performance. It isn't quite as good as the new i5 12600K, but the motherboards you can get are cheaper, making this a better value option if you're looking to really save some cash. What's more, you get a great stock cooler included, something Intel are catching up on but not quite there yet. And plus, it's a proven gaming chip, and that's what really matters when it comes to a build like this. Another key feature, of course, is support for AMD Smart Access Memory, when you pair an AMD GPU up with an AMD CPU, giving us performance gains between 5 and 7%. Always great to see. I'll be installing this into the motherboard for today's build, the Aorus B550 Pro. Now, when it comes to AMD, B550 is such a gem. It's so good value, it's pretty unreal. This Aorus board is on the slightly higher end of the equation, with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet and PCIe Gen 4 for the latest super fast SSDs. Beefy VRM cooling as well gives you a decent bit of overclocking headroom, something which will allow us to extrapolate more performance from the 5600X. The stock cooler that you get included also comes with thermal paste pre-applied if it's brand new, making the next part of the build, the cooler installation, nice and simple. So once we've installed the CPU, screw it in through each 4 corners into your motherboard's backplate, and that's basically it. The next component on our proverbial hit list, so to speak, is the RAM or the memory. A 16GB kit of AMD Spectrix D45G. Crucially, it's 2 DIMMs, important for Ryzen, and 3600MHz, exactly the speed you want to go for. Once you've installed it, which is nice and easy, make sure you remember later on to tune the speed up in your motherboard's BIOS. It can give you a 20 or 30% performance upside with Ryzen, and it's really important you get the memory right. This kit also has some RGB on, which looks sick, and it doesn't cost much more than a non-RGB alternative. The final part we need to install onto the motherboard assembly, as we're going to refer to it, is the storage. I've got a 1TB Spectrix S20G, a drive we recently reviewed over on our website, so go and give that one a read. It's got 1TB of storage, but you can get cheaper 500GB or more expensive 2TB models, and once again, has RGB, so it looks pretty sick. And you don't have to pick up a drive that lights up, but for an extra $10 or so, latest pricing and availability, as always, linked below, I thought it was a bit of a no-brainer. Plus, it looks absolutely incredible in this build with all of our other RGB components. Once the motherboard assembly, oh my goodness, has been complete, we can pick up the next component, the case choice in this build, Deepcool's brand new CK560. A chassis with plenty of RGB, 2 different colorways, white or black, and a nice airflow mesh front panel that will keep temperatures in this build low, but also look very attractive in the process. Deepcool have made some incredible gains over the last year or so in terms of the quality of some of their products, and they're still budget kings as far as price point goes. I've tried to go for the best value components I could across this build to give you more money to spend on the GPU. Something that's hugely important in 2022, even if the market is starting to ease. Unboxing this case with quite literally the smallest pair of scissors I think I've ever owned. It's not about your tools and the size of your tools, it's about how you use them. It's a motto I stand very closely by. On a more serious note though, guys, this is why hard sell foam is just not the one. Look at how absolutely battered that's been in transit. It has been air freighted, I think, so that might explain it, but even still, really something to watch out for. Hope the case isn't damaged. So far, so good. I mean, it looks okay. I'm not 100% sure on the way this glass side panel mounts, but we'll explore that in more detail later, as this part of the build is about stripping the case down and making it easier to work with as we install more and more of our other components. With the case stripped down, I'm going to lay it flat as it makes installing the motherboard a lot easier. I've also just noticed this cool little GPU support bracket, which will be quite nice in preventing GPU sag. What we're going to do then is we're going to take our motherboard and slide it into the case. All the standoffs will be in the right places already, as it's a full-size ATX board in a full-size ATX chassis, making this part a lot easier. Squeeze your rear I/O shield through this back panel of the case, and then secure the motherboard down through the 8 various screw hole locations. What you'll often find in cases like this is that the center standoff is slightly raised. Deepcool have done this here, and it makes installing the motherboard a bit easier. Definitely though, lay the case down flat, as if it's upright, gravity will fight against you, and the whole thing's just a lot more tricky. With the motherboard in, the next component on the list is the GPU. This Radeon RX 6600 XT, a 1080 and 1440p powerhouse that's going to do a great job in some of the latest titles. If you're an AMD fan, then this is definitely the build for you, and shows just how far AMD have come in recent years. From having no really viable CPUs and a weak set of GPUs, to having a solid set of both, it really is amazing to see. And this GeekaWhat card with its 3-fan cooler makes a great bet. To be fair, any 6600 XT you can find at a reasonable price, something which is actually happening more and more here in the UK with various retailers, is what I'd opt to go for. The latest links for everything can be found at the affiliate links in the description below. Installing the GPU is pretty easy. We need to push back the clip on this top PCIe slot, and then hover, don't install yet, hover it over the position you want it to go. The good news is, it fits in the case, hurrah, but we need to remove a couple of these slot covers. That's these two just here. The second and third screws of, I think there's 7 in total in this case. Once you've taken those out, you can slot your GPU in, and that's basically it. GPU installed, bit anticlimactic, but it looks good. And then we can move on to the final component. I can't believe we're nearly at the end of the video already, or the end of the build portion. Don't go anywhere, you know what's coming up shortly. Gaming benchmarks, and maybe even a cheeky little montage. Don't tell anyone. Right, so for this build, I've gone for a fully modular unit from Deepcool. Bit of a Deepcool theme going on here, and you can see we've got all of these various different cables that we can use to power up our system. What we are going to go ahead and do though is install a few cables into the PC. So we've got one of these first of all. This is an 8-pin CPU power connector. I think we actually need 2 of these for the motherboard. I've also then got a 24-pin motherboard power connection. This is the largest cable of the bunch and powers up, you guessed it, the motherboard. We're also going to pop in a PCIe power connector. 2 8-pins or a 6+2 pin is going to power up our single GPU power connection. And then hopefully in here somewhere somewhere there will be another CPU power connection to make sure we can get not only our 8 pins, but any additional 4 pins too. Plus, this power supply is 80+ gold certified with a 10-year warranty. Not really much more you can ask for. And with that done, we can boot the system up for the first time. We're going to see how this system looks properly though when it's all powered up in an epic glam montage. And I'll rejoin you shortly afterwards for the gaming benchmarks portion of the video. See you in a second, but first, roll that montage. Lovely stuff. Now that we've seen just how good this system looks when it's all powered up in an epic GeekaWhat glam gorgeous montage, all the G's there, it's time to see just how well it performs. And let me tell you, this build is pretty impressive in the frame rate department. On your screen now is a summary, a snapshot view of all the different numbers we achieved from our 6600 XT. It's been a while since we did an AMD build, and truth be told, I'd forgotten just how good the 6600 XT really is. This is best demonstrated in our first title today, Grand Theft Auto 5. An oldie, but definitely a goldie. Here we got 150 frames per second when testing out using the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode. And the game looked great at 1080p. High settings meant all the textures, reflections, shadows, all that business looked really nice. And I was impressed with the performance here. Fun fact, this is actually 1 frame per second higher than a 3060 Ti build we put together just a few weeks ago. Moving on to Battlefield 2042 next, and here at high settings we achieved 103 frames per second. The lack of any DLSS, with this being an AMD card, instead utilising Fidelity FX Super Resolution, does impact your frame rate slightly over the Nvidia alternatives, but even still, I was impressed with the frame rates, and the performance was solid. It was a similar story in COD Vanguard, where 1080p high saw this card pull in 136 frames per second on average. Strong 90 and 99th percentile results rounded off some good frame rate numbers here, and once again the game looked visually great. Moving on to Forza Horizon 5 next, a game that's a more difficult title to run, especially compared to Forza Horizon 4 and 3 that came before it. Those were fairly easy games to run. This is definitely not. 92 frames per second though suggests the impressive power under the hood of the 6600 XT. Moving on to Halo Infinite next, here we tested at 1080p high once again, and this time around pulled in 99 frames per second on average. 87 and 75 for the 90 and 99th percentile results, tested in MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner, gave us some really nice results. Next up is Apex Legends. We're moving on to the more esports first-person shooter titles, and at 1080p, you guessed it, high settings once again, we pulled in 158 frames per second. Just shy of 160 FPS on average is a mighty fine result. Finally, to wrap things up, we tested out a little bit of Fortnite. And here we tested out at first 1080p high and then 1080p competitive settings. At 1080p high, we pulled in 108 frames per second on average. Pretty good start so far. While tuning down all of our settings to low, but setting the render distance to far for the most competitive outlook, gave us 132 frames per second. Fortnite looked great, and AMD cards do tend to excel, especially when it comes to Fortnite frame rates. Something we've covered in our coverage so far of the 6600 XT and its Nvidia competitors. And with that, that just about wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a big old like rating, get subscribed. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.